Right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first session of the day, Designing for Digital Printing with International Paper and Davis Direct. Join us as we walk you through the different digital printing technologies and what results you can expect. A little air meet housekeeping. Remember that you can use the live chat to have conversations and make comments during the session, and use the questions tab to ask any questions for the Q&A at the end of the session. Today we have with us AJ Layo, the account manager for International Paper. She's worked for International Paper for 15 years in various roles from transportation, marketing, and now sales. She lives in Atlanta and manages accounts throughout the Southeast. Then we also have Mitchell Vaughan, Vice President of Davis Direct. He's a second generation printer who has worked in pre-press, estimating, and sales since 2009. Welcome, guys.
How's everybody doing? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming today and joining us. We hope that this presentation will sort of shed some light on what is happening in the printing industry, especially for an audience such as this with creative directors and designers and agency type customers as well. So I want to go ahead and get started. And basically what I thought was like, why would you need to know this? Especially if you're in the world of using print media for your brand or your institution, association. Digital printing is, for a lack of a better term, just exploding right now. Every printing company out there has some sort of printing, a digital printing device. So what does that really mean? It means that more of your jobs are going to be printed digitally instead of, something traditional like or analog like offset lithography or flexography, etc. So as a designer, whatever role you have, you want to make sure that the product you're designing is coming out exactly how you anticipate, because we've seen it firsthand. You don't want something that you've poured your heart and soul in, a great award-winning design, to come out looking horrible and looking cheap. So not to say that all digital is like that, but there's some areas to take concern of. So okay, obvious disclaimer, no printing device or technology is perfect. There's no printing job that's absolutely perfect. They all, and in speaking specifically with digital technology, they all have strengths and they all have weaknesses. That's why most printing companies utilize more than one technology. So for instance, us here at Davis Direct, we are primarily an offset lithography printer, but we have we have all three of the printing technologies in some form or fashion. So just disclaimer, there's no perfect machine. If a printer or a manufacturer of a device says there is, run for the hills. So the three main technologies I'm going to talk about today are dry toner, liquid toner, and inkjet. And I'm not going to say that that is all there is out there, but these are the primary forces in the market today. And I will make another disclaimer. I don't know everything about all of these technologies. However, I live and breathe this stuff every day. I deal with dry toner and liquid toner and inkjet here in our facilities. So more than likely, I can answer most of your questions and shed some light on most of the issues and most of the strengths of these technologies. So we're going to start with dry toner. Dry toner, you may hear it termed laser printing, is the most common device in the marketplace today. That technology has been around literally since the 60s and 70s, developed by Xerox. You can call it laser printing or xerography. It is the most common device out there. It is relatively inexpensive. The equipment is relatively inexpensive for us to invest in. It's pretty inexpensive to operate. And just a few examples of what manufacturers make these machines: Xerox, Konica Minolta, Ricoh, Canon. That's just to name a few. So these names probably from office printers or things of that nature. This technology is not very much different than an office copier. It's just made for a higher quality commercial scale. So without trying to get super technical, it's not supposed to be a boring technical overview of all these printing technologies, but the basic premise is a finely ground polymer-based toner, infinitely fine, is attracted to a negatively charged image that's drawn onto a drum, and that toner is heated and pressed into the paper and melted to fuse. The term fuse you would see if somebody replaces a component, they might replace the fuser. It is a superheated, several hundred degrees roller that rolls over the image and melts that polymer to the paper. Like I said, not unlike the office equipment you may see, but again, some of these pieces of equipment that printers use are commercial grade. They're meant for actual job work. Let me go to the next one here. The versatility of the dry toner world is pretty astounding. It supports inline finishing, folding. Most of these devices you see can kind of fit that 13 by 19 inch sheet and do, things like that. Well, some of these toner machines can actually print a 13 by 40 inch sheet. It's called a banner style sheet. So some instances, you need 250 of a stringer style product. It's absolutely perfect. You can get it on a digital device. You don't have to go to a sheet fed lithographic press and do all the plates and make ready. There's a lot of different versatile options with toner. You can have special colors. Some of these newer machines have silver inks, they have white inks, they have expanded gamut inks. A lot of versatility. The printed images are very durable. They're rub resistant because that polymer is being melted into or onto that paper. So one of the areas that we see dry toner kind of, I wouldn't say fall behind, and I'm probably, if a manufacturer is listening to this, they're probably going to want to shoot me. But what we tend to see in dry toner is the quality is sort of, like I put down here, kind of 3 out of 5. It's not just astounding quality. It's not just junk. What happens mostly is that the printed ink overtakes the surface area of the paper it's printed on. And what I mean by that is it's almost like a waxy or a plastic film that is laid onto the paper. In the world of coated papers, gloss and satins, it's not really a big deal. Where it becomes a big deal is when you're printing on uncoated papers, like what AJ represents, the accent opaque line. It's just a beautiful, smooth finish, uncoated paper. So when you lay down a dry toner image, it's basically just it's a thin film of, for lack of a better term, it's plastic that's a fine layer, but it does kind of have that a really glossy or a really shiny look to it. And in certain circumstances, that's kind of the opposite of what you're trying to achieve. The substrate compatibility is fairly limited. What I mean by that is you could have, there's 100 different papers out, or 100,000 different papers out there. You have textured papers, you have synthetic papers, you have vinyls, pressure sensitives, tear resistant, Tyvek, things of that nature. Well, due to the nature of how dry toner works, it's putting a ton of pressure and a ton of heat onto the paper at one time after the image has been laid down. So with synthetic papers and lightweight papers, it will distort the paper. I mean, think about paper, for the most part, paper is mostly water. And so when you lay down a superheated drum on top of that paper, you're evaporating some of that water out. And so it can distort. You may not be able to take a sheet and go, that is distorted. But when you go to a guillotine and cut it, you can see misregistrations due to distortion. Synthetic substrates are just about the same, except they're not made of water, they're made of resin-based materials, but they will stretch very easily and they can distort very easily. The textured world, so if you're somebody that wants like a felt texture or a linen texture or a cotton texture, the toner is being laid down in a way that it can't necessarily drive itself into the valleys of those textures in the paper. So there's technologies out there, like some manufacturers say, well, we use this method to drive that toner into these grooves of the paper. It kind of works, but it's super difficult and it does not come out the way you would expect it to. But I did say quality 3 out of 5. In the coated paper world, it is a very nice sharp print. The uncoated world is kind of where I'm leaning towards as far as its shortfalls. But the versatility I'm putting up there at about 5 out of 5, because you can do envelopes, you can do inline finishing, you can do these larger sizes. It's an incredibly versatile thing. And like I said, they're relatively inexpensive. So your printer, most every printer has at least one of these machines, if not a whole fleet of these machines. So, and I believe I'm going to go back 1 or 2 more. Yes. Okay. So this slide here, there is a YouTube clip, and you'll be able to get these slides later. These are, for every technology, I'm embedding a link to one of the very popular machines of each technology, and it just sort of shows you how they image something, how that machine works, and very educational, very cool. They make it look real sexy and awesome, and it's high quality graphics, but it shows you exactly what you're dealing with. Let's see here. Went there. Okay. This one's my favorite. This is the technology called liquid toner, and as I termed dry toner before, it's because it is a dry toner. If you took that cartridge out of your office printer and you dumped it on the floor, you could vacuum it up. It's a dry piece of polymer. Liquid toner was developed, I guess it was probably like in the 80s, late 80s, by a person named Benny Landa. That name's going to be more prevalent here in the future. It already is for other reasons. But Benny Landa, he's an Israeli engineer and inventor, and he invented a ink called what he called electro ink. Basically, the pigment is in he made it basically like a paste. You get it in these tubes, and it looks like toothpaste. It is a thick consistency, but it's got the pigment and most of the vehicle for that pigment. What's different is that paste is mixed with an oil-based liquid. And on these presses, they mix together and they basically make a liquid ink. It's still technically a toner, but it makes a liquid ink. And it's very important because nobody else was able to, none of these other manufacturers were able to do that with liquid technology until Benny Landa did. Well, Benny Landa was really smart, and he sold it to HP for billions of dollars. And now HP owns that technology, and they utilize it in their Indigo press lineup. So when I talk about liquid toner, I'm talking about HP Indigos. We went down the road I'll briefly describe. We went down the road in like the late, I'd say 2007 or 8, with a dry toner machine. Those technologies were sort of, for the commercial use, were not fully developed yet. And we had problems after problems. The quality wasn't there, or consistency wasn't there. It looked, we just were having problems after problems. It wasn't until we put in an Indigo that we realized, like, oh, like, this is digital printing. This is what it can do. So the printing process of the Indigo is not unlike a dry toner. A laser draws an image onto a drum-like surface, and that liquid ink is oppositely charged to that drum, so it's attracted to the drum. What happens, though, is that ink gets transferred to a compressible rubber blanket. And that is exactly what happens in an offset lithographic world. So what makes this so great is that, A, it's a liquid toner, so it behaves very much like a traditional ink would, and B, the blanket then compresses into the paper and offsets or transfers the ink onto the paper. So you can get just this wonderful print that actually takes on the properties of the printing substrate. So if you're printing an uncoated sheet like this accent sheet, accent is our house uncoated sheet. It's beautiful. The Indigo prints just look amazing on it. It takes on that flat, quote, matte look to things. If you're using a pearlescent paper, it'll take on that metallic kind of thing. I mean, on and on and on. If you're using a gloss, it will impart those glossy finishes. So it imparts, probably right now, I would say, the highest quality digital image on the market, especially for the printers and and some of these bigger markets. They have Indigo presses with high definition heads on them, and it's quite astounding. Like I said, it takes on the nature of the substrate, and it looks very similar to what you would see on offset lithography. Again, there's a video here that shows basically like the science behind Indigo and their liquid toner technology. It supports the broadest media range out there. So the image is transferred to a blanket. The blanket is heated. It's not nearly as hot as a fuser in a toner machine, but it's compressed into that paper, and you can actually prep the paper with what we call like a null cycle. We can hit the paper with the heated blanket, get it ready for the ink. And so you can run synthetics, you can run traditional papers, you can run metallized papers, you can run folding boards. I mean, it is just it's a myriad of substrates that can be used. Every Indigo press out there can be outfit with a 5th color unit. So ours is outfit with a 5th color unit, so we can run true spot colors. They can do Pantone mixes, they can do custom mixes. You can do white. You can do, now they do have a support for silver. So imagine doing like variable data with silver metallic ink. Like it's pretty awesome stuff. The Indigo presses, some printers have it where they have 6 or 7 ink stations, which means you can run, the traditional CMYK, but you can also run orange, green, and violet, and you can hit the color gamut of the whole Pantone library, and you can flirt with that RGB color space. It's pretty astounding because they can put 7 different color separations down. One downside to the Indigo technology is that with it being a liquid ink, I've heard the term used like it's a softer ink, and so sometimes it can be considered not as durable as dry toner or inkjet, and that's especially true if the printer is not utilizing a digitally prepared or digitally treated paper like the Accent Opaque Super Smooth sheet. And I'm going to transition to the next slide, and AJ is going to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, so we work with International Paper. We work with all the OEMs, the office equipment manufacturers, to make sure that we have paper that will run on their presses. Accent Opaque, like Mitchell said, is one of our premium opaque sheets that we have the broadest spectrum of basis weights, all the way from 60 to 120 pound, and we are in the process of creating a 130 pound right now to offer to the lineup. And the important part here is specifically for the indigos, we do make a 3-star certified paper. So if we go to the next slide, like Mitchell said, the reason this is so important is using a 3-star certified sheet is because it measures the toner adhesion. So if you're working with a printer that has an indigo, the 3-star option is best, especially if you're printing something that's going to be handled a lot, that you just don't want the ink to come off. That is where the 3-star super smooth accent is so important. So a 2-star is like 80 to 90% toner adhesion, and a 3-star is anything greater than a 90% toner adhesion. So we just thought it was important that you understood kind of the star rating system. So we work with HP, of course, but then we have a third party in Rochester at Rochester RIT that does these tests for us and helps us get the different certifications. So if you go to the next slide here, this is just an example of the toner adhesion, and this is kind of what RIT does to our paper to get it certified. And to simplify it, they basically take Scotch tape and do a tape pull test. So you see at the far right, the 3-star, very little ink came off. So just something to consider as you are designing your products or projects, and to think about, what digital equipment that your printer has, something to consider when choosing your paper. And so, we make, it's kind of a secret sauce that we put in the paper. It's more at the manufacturing level. So when the paper is being made, we are adding the secret sauce there to make it the 3-star certified. And we also do that for our inkjet treated papers. So it's not something that we put on the paper after the fact. It is in that process as it's going through the manufacturing process. So I think that leads us to some inkjet papers next that Mitchell's going to talk about.
Yes, so we've talked about dry toner, we've talked about liquid toner and indigo. Now we're getting away from toner and we're talking specifically about water-based inks. And the world of inkjet, it's considered the wave of the future, and I am 110% in agreement with that. The world of inkjet, you see, like I listed all these manufacturers: Xerox, HP, Canon, Kodak, Konica, Kyocera, Fuji, Screen. That's just to name a few of the people that are heavily investing R&D into commercial inkjet. The video here on this slide takes you into, I believe it's the Konica Minolta, what's called the KM1 press. It's a commercial printer's press, if you will. And when we're talking about commercial inkjet printing, basically the technology or the process is very, I hate to say it's very straightforward. It is water-based inks are fed through a very small nozzle inside of a print head, and they are fired, and ink is fired on command in very specific places on the substrate. I am going to kind of mention that I'm not going to talk any about like wide format inkjet in this arena. That would take like 5 or 6 sessions to go through, and frankly, I don't know enough about it. We offer that kind of stuff, and we use inkjet technology for that service, but I'm talking about commercial inkjet. One area there's several types of like inks that are used and how those inks are cured or dried. The first one is UV. So in that instance, the ink itself has what we term photo initiators. And basically they're just, think about it as links in the ink that are separated. And when they're exposed to UV light, they come together and they form a bond onto the substrate. So once ink is sprayed or jetted onto the surface of the paper, a highly focused UV light will instantly dry or cure that ink to the printing substrate. The other types out there are what we call solvent inks, where the ink has gases and other solvents in it that need to either disperse into the paper or evaporate completely. So those kind of machines tend to be a little bit slower production speeds. They can impart pretty astounding quality and things of that nature. But the other primary ink out there and drying technology is just through heat and evaporation. So the water that carries the pigment has to evaporate and leave the pigment particle alone and leave it there on the paper. So a lot of these presses that you might see have drying stations. They have heat stations, where the inks are allowed to cook, if you will, and evaporate that water. Commercial inkjet printing, I would say, and again, I would probably be tracked down and beat by somebody if they were listening from a manufacturer, is I would classify it as in an adolescent state. There are some technologies that are just unreal with their state of development, but there are some that have a long way to go. In general, the cost, it's very commercially difficult to use inkjet technology right now. The cost, the ink is basically liquid gold. It is so expensive. It is very difficult to manufacture because you're talking about trying to fire ink through a nozzle that is finer than the point of a needle. I mean, these things it has to be, excruciatingly precise in the manufacturing of that. The print heads are expensive. With these commercial print heads, you strike a print head with a sheet of paper, it could cost $20,000, $30,000 to replace a print head. Not to mention that the cost of the actual machines are super expensive. I mean, most of these that I'm going to show you later, they're $1 million+ investment just for the equipment before you put any paper through or any ink through. Quality is not necessarily an issue. Speed is not really an issue. What really becomes the issue is the economy of scale. I mean, the quality and the speed will continue to just rise and rise and rise. And as more people, like as printers get more invested into inkjet, the costs will go down. But realistically, no matter how you slice it, the inkjet printing technology will be the dominant printing technology in the future. Right now, the analog technologies are still dominant. The sheet-fed lithography, web with lithography, flexography, screen printing, that stuff does the high volume, high coverage stuff. It will become inkjet at some point. So not to go back a little bit, we're just going to talk about some of the models of these presses. And the reason I'm sharing this, and I'm going to get to a couple more slides that will actually, really give you the ammunition you need to talk with your printers. These machines are the ones that I would consider, to be the higher quality, higher productivity machines. You have Xerox's iGen series. They have series like 2, 3, 4, and 5. I mean, they come out with a new series just about every year, and rightfully so. They fix issues here and there, and they make certain things perform better, better color consistency, etc. Then they have what's called it's a very new machine called the Irides. And then they have their kind of mid-range machines. It's the one that we operate out of we have another facility in Auburn, and we use their Versant machine. Very flexible, versatile machine. We can run, pretty thick substrates. We can run envelopes. I mean, it's a very, very nice machine. Then you have Konica Minolta and their Acurio presses. Heidelberg and Rico have partnered together to sell their Versifier presses. And then Kodak has had the Next press for a number of years. It's not as popular in the market, but the folks that have it, the printers that have it love it, and they do really nice work off of them. I'm going to go next to basically liquid toner is indigo. So HP Indigo. So the primary flagship presses are the 7000 series. Those are the 13 by 19 inch presses. From 2010 upward to today, they've developed 20 inch by 29 inch machines that are called the 10,000, the 12,000, and now the 15K. They've got what they call the 30K, which is a packaging grade press. You can run stuff like 30, 40 point board for folding cartons. And then you have things like the 20K, which is a 30 inch wide web. And that's made for flexible packaging. It's made for labels and things of that nature. So Indigo has their foot in just about every single aspect of digital printing. And then inkjet for production, commercial use. If a printer comes to you and says, we have the Fuji J press or the Konica Minolta KM1, that's some heavy hitting presses. Those are the ones that are above and beyond everybody else. They are two of the most high quality presses out there. They're fast. They lay down just absolutely beautiful ink. The Canon series and the HP series are very, very fast commercial grade presses. The Canon I series is a cut sheet series. They have web fed series as well, but they're realistically they're made for low to mid coverage jobs that that turn into booklets, or a lot of transactional printing is done with these machines. And then you have the HPT series. Those are high-speed web-fed printing presses for book publishing and magazine publishing and newspaper publishing and things like that. They're incredible machines, how fast they are and the quality that they can output. So not that you need to sit there and remember every single one and ask printers, do you have an Irides? That's not what the point of this is. This is to say, as a printer, based off of everyday life in this industry, these are the ones that these are the models of presses that we see the best work off of. So there are digital press design limitations, and these, again, with technology going up and quality going up, these become less of an issue. But what I would say is small type, small reverses, fine line work that's less than 4 or 5 point can get pretty difficult to reproduce and reproduce well. Solid grays and browns, especially in the toner world, even the indigo world. I mean, those colors show imperfections so easily that you could see an imperfection or a defect quite easily when you're doing, if your job is being produced on a dry toner machine. Something like the J press from Fuji or the KM1, this kind of stuff would not be an issue. The color gamut is an issue for all digital presses. 4-color process in general is not a large color gamut, and some digital presses can push that a little bit further just naturally with just the way their inks are pigmented. But realistically, like on our HP Indigo, we've measured, we can hit about 70 to 75% of the Pantone library just in the 4-color process that we use. So with some of these newer models, you can add other ink stations to expand that gamut. You can add spot colors. If your brand is Reflex Blue and you've got to use that in digital, a lot of times you can get those inks mixed specifically for your press. So I am going to look at this next one here. Okay, what to ask your printer. So you've got a job, a project you've spent a lot of time on, the customer's very picky, you want this brand to be represented properly. What do you ask that printer? If they don't do problem, I put a little disclaimer in there. If they don't do these, don't do business with them, because what I'm saying you're asking for is not that much. Ask for live production samples that they have produced on their machines. Don't let them just show you like the manufacturer's samples. We get press manufacturers come in all the time and they have all these beautiful samples laid out. It's like, look at how awesome this look. They're in a lab style environment and they can produce some really, really awesome things. And guess what? They can pick and choose what they want to show you. So if a defect is in one, they're just going to take that one out and not show you that. Have a printer show you previous jobs they've done on that device, on that paper, what have you. And then ask for a digital press, what we call digital press proofs here, or digital press samples, and even Pantone simulations. A lot of times when we're doing jobs that are on the digital, that are on our digital devices, we can set up the machine pretty quickly. We can load the actual paper and we can actually show the customer, hey, this is almost a prototype, a sample of what you're getting. It's not just a proof that we're going to aim for. This is a sample. So you can have it on the actual paper most of the time. Obviously there could be circumstances where that's not super viable. But the other thing is ask for Pantone simulations. I spoke about Pantone and brand simulations. So I spoke about color gamut. Well, that really, really affects a lot of what you all do as designers. Can you hit my brand color? Can you, how does it look? So we've done this several times. It's we come up, it's like a little, I can't remember, it's probably like a 6x3 card that this was actually a customer of Lee's here that's hosting us today. Basically, you want like a reasonable area of that Pantone brand color printed, and you want ours is about 1 3/4 by 1 is what I said. It's very specific, but you want it to be large enough to where that they can tear an edge off, they can look at it under a light booth, they can or you can against your product. You need them. You really need them to indicate the press model and the paper being used. So on ours, this was printed on an HP Indigo 7600 on accent opaque cover, 100 panel. And then you would want to have examples of type shown in various point sizes. Us, we go from 16 down to 4. And it just shows you, hey, in this color, this is what 8, 10 point type looks like. Might look great. You go down to 4 point, you're like, oh my gosh, we need to change that. Something's not really good here. But this is something you can ask your printer to provide. You can design it for them or whatever. 9 times out of 10, if they're a solid printing company, they're going to do this stuff for you to gain your trust, to gain your business. And so this is a common practice for us, and we can do it on any of our devices. It's simple to do. But realistically, ask your printer. Your good printers are infinitely good resources to have. They're not going to charge you to pick up the phone and go, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. what do you recommend I do? Do you think this would work good or work well digital? Think about your printer as a consultant. They're not going to charge you. They're not going to get annoyed with you. That's what a printer is all about nowadays. It's not just putting ink on paper. We want to make sure that your product is the way you expected it, and it's the way that you designed it to be. So I think that's just about covers our presentation. I wanted to put out here, when AJ and I first started talking about this was going to be in person back in 2020, and we were going to find out who was going to be attending, and we were going to create personalized notepads, like 50 sheet tear pads with your name on it, maybe your company's name on it, and hand it out, have something tactile for you to see. Well, of course, that went away when the conference went away last year. So the only way we can do that is if you'd like to have a personalized 50 sheet tear pad, an accent opaque swatch book. AJ, I think that's the latest one. Is that correct? So awesome showcase of these papers and shows special effects. Very good resource to have. AJ and them have been kind enough to supply that. And then also we're going to have printed probably 5x7 cards with the same image on the same paper using all three of these different technologies. So we're going to print some on a dry toner machine. We're going to print some on an indigo, and we're going to print some hopefully like on a KM1 inkjet press that will show you kind of more or less what in the heck is he talking about. This will be an example, a visual example of what's going on. So in order to do that, just go to this web page here.
I think Lee put it in the chat.
Oh, good. Yeah, I need to switch over here. Yes, it is in the chat. So you go over there. It's going to populate. It's going to populate to us and say, "Hey, so and so wants this." If you just need your name, number, email address, and or not your number, but your name, your email address, and the company you work for, and the address you want it sent to, we'll get them sent to you. So at this point, I don't know, Lee, what we need to do from here, but it's question time. I think we've got a couple of minutes left, if I'm not mistaken, like 3 minutes.
Yeah, we're great on time. If anyone has any questions, just put them into the questions tab. Thank you guys. It's always so interesting as a designer just to understand how something is made. It's kind of like when you're designing for a website, understanding how it's programmed makes you a better designer for websites. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of the same thing. Understanding how something is printed, it makes you a better designer for print materials. Yes. To get that better end product.
Yes. And my contact information is here. I promise it's no strings attached. If you have questions, if you're not even in our market, we're in Montgomery, Alabama. We do service, the Atlanta, Atlanta market, the Georgia market, some Mississippi and Florida. But if you have a question, drop me an email, send me a text. I'd love to be a resource just to say, this is what I see in the market. I don't know every printer out there, but I could probably point you to who might have a piece of technology that would work well for your project, or something to that effect. So, and I'm sure AJ'd love to talk paper with you and what they have to offer. So, but other than that, we're open to any questions you may have. If not, we appreciate your time.
I can definitely attest to that partnership. As Mitchell knows, even last night and today, I've been working with him on sourcing some paper for a fun pocket folder. And that there was never even a question of, are we going to print this for you? It was just, oh yeah, let me get this for you. And of course, obviously, we're going to print it with Mitchell.
Good.
And then, AJ has been great about, she came to us last year, obviously pre-pandemic, and sat down and just showed us the whole line of papers that they have. And just even knowing kind of that's a paper, but as designers, we can get stuck in a rut and like, oh yeah, just put it on that paper. Mm-hmm. And so it's good to just keep remembering that new stuff is always out there. And it was really cool that AJ showed us this comparison of a paper that we had been using all the time and one of her sheets that was actually cheaper, and you couldn't tell the difference. So I just wanted to point that out too. Just always be, on the lookout for what's available out there.
Yeah.
We've got a couple people saying thank you in the comments, and looking forward to seeing those print samples. I know I already submitted the form. You don't have to ship mine though.
I can drop it off later whenever I get it. It might take. We're still working on the actual printed cards. It might be a few days before we can get them shipped out, but we'd love to share that.
Oh, that's totally fine. All right, well, it doesn't look like we have any questions, but lots of thank yous. And thank you guys from me and from AF District 7 and AF Montgomery for being here with us today. Definitely enjoyed your session. And of course, as a reminder, we will have recordings available to everybody after the conference is over. And I will, of course, make sure you guys get a copy of that as well.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.